welcome back. It is time for another devlog. This one is number 27. So, starting off the week on Monday, I was adding functionality to control the global audio settings, not just for the main menu control, which was already built in, but actually extend that to controlling the sounds in game that I've already have through Fmod. Um, so I had to kind of do a little bit more work with Fmod and kind of research how I can get this done. And doing a little research, I learned about in Fmod there's something called VCA mixer. It allows you to have control and allow the user to a system to allow the user to uh, integrate mixer controls into Fmod. So after I figured that out, I just had to figure out how to hook it up and add connections and listeners so that my Fmod audio manager would be controlled by the UI. After some work, got that working, and I'll go ahead and demo that now. Alright, so in the game here, let's just can hear the sound levels here. I already had it set previously, so it remembers the actual, from the last game, it's persistent. In user preferences, it remembers the audio levels. So I set the master up and everything's much louder now. So if you hear the audio at full level, and then if I just maybe switch the music down, the SFX and the UI is still, you hear the music's gone down, so, but the SFX is way up. So that's all working great. So it controls the UI that's already there, but also the in-game sound effects and everything else. So that's pretty much working. Alright, so the next half of the day on Monday, I spent refactoring the game manager to use. There was a reference in the game manager over here in state control. It was actually referencing the main menu directly, and from there it was giving a bunch of public references. So it was actually coupled. That happens sometimes when you're prototyping and testing. You program in something like that to get it working, but later on I identify that that shouldn't be in there. The game manager shouldn't be directly aware of any other game object in the system for the majority of the application. So I removed that and I refactored it to use a listener, just to send messages, game load events. So like, when to, so it's in communication through global event messages and not directly through reference inspector links like this. So decoupled that, had to refactor, had to retest that. On Tuesday I got the refactor working, but I actually couldn't test the whole complete game cycle, game over functionality because it had been broken ever since I refactored the menu a while back and I added the scene manager loading, right? So I never actually fixed that part of the functionality. So on Tuesday I began fixing up the game over functionality to work with 2D and VR. So I do a full game over cycle. Had to refactor a bit of stuff just to get it working. VR was a bit trickier because of the world canvases, not the 2D menus. So I had to kind of. It's always like a separate implementation pretty much for VR when you're coming to like UI menus because you have to have world canvases instead of a screen overlay. Also, I noticed that I hadn't actually implemented the player death reload functionality on VR. Uh, when I do the player death, it was the screen fade out was only working for 2D overlay canvases, so I had to come up with a solution, clever solution to actually do that. The dual world fade out with world canvases. But I got that working by the end of the day, and um, made sure the spinner was working too. Um, on Wednesday, I finished up the full cycle game over functionality with 2D and VR working. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate the VR load cycle working as well as the VR um, reload player death reload functionality. Okay, so here we are at the main screen. We'll go ahead and load into the game. So all this is the same as previous. And so we have our game here. So we'll go ahead and do a end game here. So it fades out, and then it'll load the main menu again with the credits screen. It's all fixed up so it doesn't bleed over the edge of the canvas. That's great. So going back here, and then I tested it again to make sure that there's no initialization problems. If you go through another cycle, then it should load just as it did before without any initialization issues. So we're back in the game again. So full cycle, looking great. So, and then for testing the the player death reload, so we'll just, when this happens, it'll zoom in, the background will go dark, and then he'll go dark, and it'll do its loading thing, and then it should fade back into where he was last. So all that's looking good now in VR and in 2D. All that's working correctly. So for the rest of the Wednesday, I moved on to implementing functionality to pick up items and add them into the inventory by walking over items, also picking up items by interacting, pressing A, and also picking up items from chest. I also implemented simple locking doors to where this door on the right here, it won't open unless you have a key card in your inventory, and then this door up here, it won't open unless you interact with the wall panel with a key card in your inventory. So I'll go ahead and demo that now. Okay, so if you walk over here, I can actually show. I built a little UI thing to kind of show you what you have in your inventory, because this item manager, you can add items on start, but it doesn't show you what you have currently. So every time you add an item, it'll actually show you. So I built this with Odin Inspector. So right now I have the pistol and the rifle. And when I walk over, oh, I gotta unpause it. When I walk over an item, you'll see now I have the key card, so I can see what's in my actual inventory items. And so now that I have the key card, this won't open up for me until I interact, and now it'll stay open, right? And I set this door to once you open it, it'll always stay unlocked, right? Um, all right, so this door here is locked. It won't let you through. And here I can pick up the key card. I just have a sword icon there, but it'll give you the key card. And also, I can get the key card from this chest, so interacting with the chest does a little animation. That's great. So now I have the key card, and the door detects that I have the key card and opens it up. And um, it'll continue opening up while I have the key card. So I set this to if you it closes, it is now if you look at the door, it's now locked, right? But if you go to the collider, it'll open up. So let's just say um, my character, if I tell him to um, so I have my items, destroy all items. So now I no longer have the key card, and I try to go back, it'll be locked. So it doesn't stay open unless you have the key card. So all that's working pretty good as far as picking up items and opening up locked doors. So that pretty much brought me to the start of Thursday. After that was all done, I started in on the big job for the end of the week, the last 2 days, working on new functionality with a new package, Rayfire. Um, so this new package will actually allow me to have destruction of enemies when they die, and also shooting, have kind of like destructible environment objects like cover or whatever I want to have. Um, for the for the enemy death, I fixed a few easy issues like turning off the audio, turning off the laser. But for I spent the majority of the day diving into the new documents and vids and digesting a lot of information about the Rayfire package, about how it works and how I can actually what it can do and how I can actually implement something. Just like usual, just like all with all my other packages, starting from scratch, um, and kind of really understanding, what it is. And so I was able to do some testing with a rough prototype at the end of the day, getting it testing and trying to get a prototype working. I was actually able to get the robot to blow apart, but there was a bunch of issues. Um, so that kind of carried over to Friday. Um, the main problem I was having was optimization. I get a huge FPS spike whenever I did an explosion. Something was not going right. So I was doing it dynamically at runtime, and so that was causing a lot of calculation whenever the explosion happened, and it was really freezing up the frame rate. So that was no good. So I had to do a lot more research and a lot more testing to figure out another alternate method where you kind of go in and you pre-fragment the mesh into a prefab. There's tools to do this and to swap out the mesh at runtime when it happens to save on frame rate. So after a bunch more testing and trying to get it to work, um, I had to actually do a build. I haven't done a build in a long time to actually test and see what the FPS input impact looked like in an actual production build. It was still not very great, but with further work by the end of the day, I was able to actually figure out how to pre-fragment with a low enough object count to avoid an FPS spike. I think the tool was actually giving me too many of these little small objects and trying to calculate all the physics, and colliders, when they blow apart. It's just too much at once. So I was able to actually lower that fragment count to like larger objects where it still looks pretty good. Um, in fact, I like it better, but it just yeah, the performance is good enough where I tested it in an actual build and I don't see any sort of frame dip or frame drop, so it's good enough for me. So I'll go ahead and demo that. It was actually kind of fun working with this package, doing explosions. So we'll do that. So this is the work for the what happens when you shoot the character. He does his little animation, and now he blows apart spectacularly. Isn't that great? And then the he kind of fade. He doesn't fade away, but his pieces kind of shrink into nothing, and then he goes away. So that's about it for next week. I'll be doing prototyping on destructible environment objects and a little bit more small issues. But that's pretty much all I have to go on. I can't really justify doing any other significant features right now. I'm pretty much looking at starting on my first level prototyping, actually getting into using the dungeon architect package that I was using in the very beginning 6 months ago. So and stuff like that, just to kind of like start building the actual levels, which is pretty interesting. And then or build like a gray box level where I can actually do some prototype testing in order to find the fun of the game. So that's what's going on next week, and thanks for tuning in. I will talk to you later.